emailed you about the APA citation with like more than 6 authors because I found something on. Did you ever?
I did figure it out. Hold on.
Okay.
I'll answer it in 1 minute.
Okay, so like right here.
Hey, Hannah, can you run down to my office and grab my APA manual? It's either on my desk or on the shelf right above my desk.
Okay, so like this sentence, so like this is it.
And really quick, hang on. It's spiral bound.
Okay. I'm good. Sorry, this is just an example. So like if I was using this sentence and I wasn't quoting it, but see how this person is in here? I don't have to cite them if I was just like using the sentence. They're the original author.
They're the original author of that information. So
You have to quote
I mean, technically, yes, you can cite them
okay, so
as if you're paraphrasing that information.
yeah, so then in my paper, I just was like added them as a second source.
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
It's always better to go back
So
to,
then I have to go and find the original text and add it to the references. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, if you cite them, where'd you cite them in your paper?
Well, that wasn't then, but I just had it right here.
Oh, so that's,
If they have the citation included in the references, do you have to go find the article, or can you just use that citation? I mean, I know it's like, you probably should, but like, do you have to?
you probably should find it and read it.
Okay.
Now, reality,
You want.
right? You can just go to the reference page, get the full citation, put it in your reference page. And a lot of people do that, and that's okay too. And I've done that, and I'm not saying that, I'm not going to be like holier than thou type of a thing. Find all the original articles type of thing. But I will say that when you're in the stage of reading and reading a lot so that you can learn, you should be pulling those articles and reading. But sometimes you stumble across stuff just like, oh, that's such good information. And they do a really good job of paraphrasing somebody else's work. You don't need to go back and find it. You got it there, but you should cite the original person.
Yeah.
Okay, Holly's question. And I looked this up and figured it all out the other day because I'm in the process of writing something right now. I got an article accepted and I had to do some revisions, and I put a citation in that has 8 authors. And so I was like, I got to figure this out. All right, one work by multiple authors. When a work has 6 or more authors, cite only the last name of the first author, followed by et al. So that's 6 or more. And the year for the first and subsequent citations. It gets really messy. Okay, I'm going to have to just show you an example because it gets so messy.
For like in the document?
Well, there's, hang on. I'll just open it. How many authors are in the one that you're talking about, Holly?
I don't remember. I had multiple that were like more than 6, and I know that's what we had discussed. Like it was either 5 or 6, and I had multiple that were like up to 10 or something. I don't know, because it was like a meta-analysis or something, and it was a big collaboration or something. So.
Okay. So let me show you in your reference page. This is what it looks like. I even told my co-authors, this is the correct way to do it, even though it doesn't look right. I looked it up. Okay, so I have 8 co-authors. This is in my reference page. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then ... and then you put the last one. So number 7 is missing. Sorry, number 7, you're never going to show up in any reference list. And then here's number 8. And then you do all the rest of it just like you normally would. And that's in your reference page. So let me find the place in the text where it is. That's not it. Hang on. Where did it go?
Well,
it's this one right here.
Does 7th ever get credit then?
Lester et al. 2012 is the correct way to in text cite somebody more than 6 authors.
Yeah, the in-text citation I wasn't having issues with because usually if it's a pretty common rule that if there's that many you just do it all. But it was just like when I was doing the actual citation.
The full reference.
Yeah, the full one. Just because like the Purdue OWL, everybody's like go to that because that's the updated version. But that on that it says something different. So that's why I was confused.
Hold on. I'm finding more. Oh yeah, and then I had to turn more than 6 authors. I had to turn to a different page. Hang on. Here it is. When authors number 8 or more, include the first 6 authors' names, then insert 3 ellipses, ... and add the last author's name in text. Follow the citation guidelines in 6.212, which is first name, et al., and the year.
Okay, so that's if it's 8 or more, not 6 or more. It's just 8 or more.
When authors are 8 or more, do the ... When it's 6, you list them all in the reference page.
Okay, so it is the ... is the
8 or more.
okay.
Yep. I know, it's confusing.
It's just it's just weird. I don't know if I've never had to write a citation with that many authors before because I feel like I've never seen the ... That's why when I looked it up, I was double checking and I was like,
Yeah.
this isn't right. I'm so confused. So
It's so nitpicky, and that's why it's worth it to just spend the whatever $30 to get the APA manual.
What kind of APA manual do you have? Just in the cover?
The APA manual.
That's the one.
It is the only APA manual.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's the 6th edition, so if you get all the old versions, you're making mistakes because it's the 6th edition is the current one.
There's like pocket, APA manual.
Well, that's just because it's smaller,
Okay.
pocket size.
I mean, well, yeah, I'm on Amazon and there's just
Yeah.
there's stuff
As long as
that
it
is
is
the bestseller.
Yes, a bestseller.
According to Amazon.
Okay. Can somebody close that door really quick?
Just outing yourself for being on Amazon.
I mean, I'm looking up an APA manual.
It's worth buying it, guys. And get the spiral bound one. It lays flat on your book, on your desk. Okay, so any other questions about APA anything or citing or KTP in general or lit review or?
I have a question about KTP. So the presentation, it says that it's got to be 10 minutes. So I was under the assumption that we were just going to take what image we made and put it on a PowerPoint and just explain it. Are we supposed to have multiple slides? Like, how does this presentation supposed to look? Because there's not very much to go off of,
I put examples up on Canvas, and we went over it in class a few weeks ago. I don't know if you were here or not. I can't remember what day we went over it, but there are examples. Hang on.
Like 10 slides, I think.
Yeah, it's not very many slides. 8710. Forgetting what I'm looking. I got so many folders. Hold on, still thinking about it. So here is an example of one. That's good.
I don't think you put the PowerPoint on
I thought I did.
You put the KTP examples up like we asked.
Crap.
What file is this under? Because it's not on the, I didn't see it. I only saw the KTP examples.
Okay, apparently I forgot to put the presentations up, so I apologize.
Yeah.
I will do that. But you can see this one has, 10 slides plus 2 for references, which is, not really super necessary. And then a question slide and a title slide. But here, they're talking about their population, what some of the background research they found was. So a lot of what you're putting into that first couple of paragraphs in your KTP, like the little mini lit review, right? All of this should also be, doc students, this is what's in your lit review. in a super condensed version. And so they're providing citations throughout as they go, like down here.
Do we cite just the information that we're putting in the KTP, not the lit review?
You cite whatever you need to cite.
I was just gonna say, because we have to condense it, some citations from the lit review will not be transferred to the KTP.
Then don't put those in. Yeah, only what goes in the KTP. And then here she's describing existing camps, and then more existing camps, and then her knowledge translation plan, that second section in the document that has like the narrative of what the KTP is, and then the visual model of it. So you can see on this side, population and characteristics of the population, her intervention, and some outcomes or benefits of it, what the setting would be, and then the outcomes of that setting. If I were to give feedback, I would say that there needs to be more detail in this setting part here of what the intervention looks like. Because again, think about what a KTP is meant to be, is like a tear sheet in a hospital where there's like a pad of paper and it has this on one page front and back, and people can just walk by and be like, camps for military kids, I want to know all about that, and take it and go. And so they should walk away with a good chunk of literature to support what they're going to do, and then a really good descriptive example, whether it's in a visual or in text, it should be in both places, of what it would look like. So this is a pretty good one. I'll upload these as soon as we're done. Sorry about that. Okay, other questions? Hannah, you like maybe have a question?
Well, I don't remember if I asked this question already. Okay, so if you have like a more broad topic like outdoor rec, and like I haven't really found specific interventions like published in literature, but I can use all of the articles that I found and create my own intervention, right?
A recommendation.
Okay.
Yep.
And that can be like my model and everything.
Right, because you are synthesizing what all the literature says.
And like putting it into.
Yeah, but you have to recommend something that's feasible and realistic, right? So if everything is saying that outdoor rec interventions are like 3 days long, and you recommend something that's 18 days long, right? Not going to happen.
Okay.
It's just not feasible.
Okay.
Is the model basically a model of? Is it a model of the intervention, or does it just include the intervention?
It includes the intervention. It's a visual representation of the KTP, not like all the literature. I mean, there's pieces of that in there, but that KTP section, the knowledge translation plan section that you're writing the narrative for, that's where you should really say, okay, based on all this literature, this is what a potential program could look like. And then you just have a cute little visual to go along with it. Something cutesy. All right. I'll put those PowerPoints up. So any last questions? No? No? Okay, let's talk about our topic for the day. Yay! Your guys' comments were really interesting. Everybody seemed to be, I actually felt really good afterwards, after I was done reading. I'm like, yeah, I got like 20 new people on the soapbox with me to be advocates for research in rec therapy, right? So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say on that, so I had to grade some undergrad papers, and I felt you channel through me when one of the students was like, I don't understand why we had to do this. Research isn't even part of our job. And
That
so,
was undergrad here?
yes.
Oh my gosh.
I'll divulge her name later.
Yeah, I want to know who.
So anyways, my response, because I didn't give feedback to papers, was I was just very straightforward, and I was like, please review like CTRSD and all these things, and I gave her all these resources, and I was like, because in fact, research is a part of the entry-level position for recreational therapists.
Woohoo!
I was like, oh, Jasmine, you've done work.
Way to go, Heather. That's totally what I want to have happen. I want you guys to go out, back to practice as a new coming faculty member. Whatever you guys have said, that when somebody says that, it is like unto hearing somebody say retarded, right?
Yeah.
When I hear that, like I feel like the flames boiling up inside of me, and like my dragon, like, I want to like shoot flames at them, right? And sometimes I do. I have totally called people out before.
I was in the middle of the library, and I know I went, woo! And like 40 undergrads looked at me like I was crazy, but I was like,
Yeah.
we just couldn't,
Way to go.
myself, and then I'll type for
I hope that's how you respond. And I hope it's because you guys literally legitimately feel that research is part of what we do. It's not an add-on, even though, and a lot of comments came up that people who work in places where they don't really do rec therapy, it's activities or whatever, it is an add-on, and that's because you're not doing rec therapy. And so in that sense, fair. It is not part of your job requirement. But if you can write the letter CTRS after your name, which everybody here can, yes, everybody here can, it's part of your job. Okay, wait, you almost can.
Almost.
And Abby almost can. That's right, you guys are close. Okay, it is absolutely part of your job. And if as newly informed, right, now you know, the burden is on you because you have the knowledge to call people out in a nice professional manner so you don't lose your jobs. All right, or whatever. Okay, so one thing I saw lots of comments on, and I had to read that McCormick and Lee article for some class that I took as a doc student. I can't remember which one. Actually, it was a trends class that Brian McCormick taught, and he made us read his article. That's okay. I made you guys read some of my articles. It's all right. That's the perks of the job as a faculty member. But he made us read that article, and I remember in there being like, what is this whole research practice gap? I was not aware of that. One, because I practiced, I think, in a non-traditional RT setting, and so I didn't really see RT the way that it was supposed to be, the way that RT is. But I certainly didn't know about this whole practitioner research gap. And so when I read that, I was like, what is this? But then as I got more and more into the role of a researcher, I started to see a lot of what those comments were saying, that practitioners didn't want to give me access because they didn't think what I had to offer was going to be of value to them. And I was getting really frustrated. And now as a faculty member where I research not practice primarily, I get that all the time. So what do you guys think about that? That's mostly what I want to spend talking about today. How do we close that gap?
I liked what he said in there about like some of the reasons why practitioners aren't wanting to read research articles and the stuff. He said overemphasis on technical matters like statistical analysis, and I totally resonated with that because like when we first started reading research articles at Western, I skip over that whole part because I didn't understand any of the words in it, and it just kind of intimidated me from the whole thing. So if like as of right now, we're a bachelor's level profession, that's what most of these, RTs are trained to do in school, that's, that they're not getting the education that's going to make them more comfortable with that kind of thing. So maybe making research articles less mathy, to use the technical term.
Dumb them down.
Yeah, kind of, I mean, or just put less, like spend less time talking about the statistics and putting more time into like recommendations for practice.
So I semi-agree with you on that one, because I do remember when I first started reading research, I was like, same thing. I didn't know what all that stuff meant. I didn't know how to understand any of it. I skimmed right on through the results sections and just went to the discussion because I wanted to know how they interpreted that and applied it, right? And some people do a really great job of applying the research in like implications or recommendations type of a thing, and other people don't. But it totally depends on where you're publishing too. Some journals, they want more of the application to practice, and other journals want application to future research. And so you just have to understand what journals you're reading and what the intended readership is. So for example, American Journal of Recreational Therapy, AJRT, it's a practitioner journal. It's supposed to be a practitioner journal, which nobody reads apparently. But their article length is like 8 pages, and they want heavy implications for practice. But Therapeutic Recreation Journal is not. I mean, I think they say it's a practitioner-based journal, but the reality is that practitioners don't really read it at all.
But would they read it more? It was less statistical?
I don't know, but there is a place for the more scholarly work too.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if I want to replicate a study, I need to know all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get it anywhere else.
Yeah.
If I see something and I'm like, whoa, I want to do that, and they make recommendations for next time somebody does this study, it needs to have a bigger sample size, it needs to have this, it needs to have that, I need to know all that stuff. And it's not going to be anywhere else other than that article. So from the research, if we want to just talk purely research, not for application to practice, I need that information.
Yeah.
So how do we get both?
I mean, if anything, I think it's important just to have at least have the section for recommendations for practice be bigger with
Okay.
more information. And I feel like a lot of articles don't provide specifics. Like it's just kind of like a generic, like here's an idea or like a vague thing for your, that you might try, rather than saying like, this is what you need to be doing. This is how long. This is, what you need to include in this intervention.
Kind of like what we're putting into our KTPs?
Yeah, exactly. But that's not, something I come across as often as I should.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Seems like that's kind of the point, or it should be.
Sometimes is the point.
Yeah.
It just depends on what kind of a researcher you are, and you get to choose what kind of a researcher you want to be. My personal focus is on application to practice.
Mm-hmm.
That I see the benefit in research for research to just generate knowledge, but I'm more interested in answering questions and fixing problems in practice. That's why I got into grad school, because I practiced and I saw issues and I wanted to learn how to fix those issues, and I didn't feel that I knew how to do it. Even with 5 years of experience working in the industry, I was like, I have these ideas, but I'm not sure, so grad school taught me how to test those ideas. And so it was applied to practice, but not everybody has that reason. Or totally going to bash on stats people right now, but a lot of statisticians just like research to be able to crunch numbers because they like the numbers for the numbers' sake, type of a thing. And they don't necessarily care about the application to it. I've had a lot of stats teachers like that.
Yeah.
They get totally lost in the numbers. Oh, you could do this, you could do that. I'm like, I don't really care about any of that. I just want to know if my intervention works. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to make changes, type of a thing. Heather, you look like you had something on like the tip of your brain.
So I think a lot of the times, because we don't have like a direct line in the articles as clinicians that say, if you're a CTRS that works in whatever population, our biggest population is geriatrics, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I feel like clinicians get lost in the weeds of their specific setting. The problems that they're facing with their specific setting and not necessarily recreation therapy.
Say that again.
So I just think people get lost in the weeds of their setting, and then they feel like nothing is applicable to them because it's not
right.
pertinent. You know what I mean? Like it's not pertinent to. I don't know.
So research isn't useful to them because it's too broad.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people get very.
Well, that's not my population, and that's not my setting. And so even if it is my population, that's not my setting. So this can't apply to me at all.
Yeah.
Or this is
Like
my
they
setting,
get
but not my
very tunnel
population.
vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if it's behavioral health, it's like, well, not behavioral health at Terre Haute Regional Hospital in Terre Haute, Indiana, with this staff and this box and this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like clinicians need to be a little bit more open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
Well, going off that too, I think I liked how he, talked about both sides. Like the clinicians are the problem too, because a lot of them are only using their personal intuition and their clinical experience, and they're not open to the research and the theories, and they think that their intuition is the best for what the situation is. So it's like a wheel.
It's a
How do you break the wheel?
vicious cycle of torture. Does somebody online want to say something? I feel like somebody unmuted those.
Yeah. And I know I've talked about this before. And we have all talked about this for the clinicians who take on interns. I think it's really important that that's part of our internship manual and contract that they work on a research project, which involves also the supervisor as well. Make sure that those new TRs that come in at least start out with some type of research base that they can take on with them. At least they have some practice under their belt before they go on to their next facility. They have something that they can start with. And usually they can take that project with them as well as leave something behind for your facility. And I know that my boss, who, like I said, I didn't know she was working on a project. She's so excited that, I'll be bringing some projects to the facility. So this is a good place to start right here. And I'm really going to push for other people to, start taking their master's program, and hopefully we'll breed some more master level students.
But this assumes that for people who take interns and, like you suggest, require that they do some type of research project, it assumes that their supervisor knows how to do it. And if what a lot of people's comments was that entry level doesn't necessarily teach the skills required to do what you guys have all learned to do in this class and in this program, going to learn to do in this program, right?
Well, what I'm saying, though, is that trickle-down effect. If we're doing it, then they'll hopefully bring that on with them and breed more people doing it.
Yeah, we have to change the culture for sure. So right. I've had, when I've supervised interns, I have met site supervisors who have told their students, forget everything you learned in class. What I teach you on your internship is how you do rec therapy. Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Every place is different.
Every place is different, and who the heck knows where they learned their stuff, right? And that is not the case, not in any sense of the word, is one person's view of rec therapy the way of rec therapy, right?
Having said
Oh,
That's how it was on my internship
that I went to. This was actually in Indiana when I was supervising interns at IU. But I was blown away by that because, again, if we're talking about specific to research, if that person doesn't know how to do it, they're not teaching it, right? If that person doesn't know how to do evaluations or assessments or evaluations there, and they just say, forget what you learned in class. It doesn't matter what you learned in class. What you learned here is how you do rec therapy. Oh man, the problems with that, right? But yes, I agree with you, Gina. It is a trickle down effect that the highest level rec therapy person, they have to know and understand research. Do they have to be an expert in it? No, not necessarily. But maybe they bring in the right people who can help contribute to it. And then from there, you have people involved at every level of the way so that an intern has a fantastic experience and walks out of there thinking, this is part of my job. I learned about it in my classes. Somebody told me that this is how part of what rec therapy is. And oh yeah, look, I saw it happening on my internship. Great. And then they go to their first job and maybe it's not happening, but they say, how come we're not doing this? This is what rec therapy is. And they might have to, butt up against some people who are like, no, that's not part of rec therapy. And then they pull out the NCTRC job analysis and say, no, see, look, it is. My teachers told me. That's like third grade. My teacher told me. Yeah, it's a trickle down to trickle up type of a thing. We have to change the culture. Okay, other thoughts about this research practitioner gap?
I think similarly, but the article talked about how grad school prepared, like master just supposed to prepare you to like consume research and apply it.
Uh-huh.
I feel like that should be brought down to the undergrad level, and like what they say the doctorate student should be brought down to master's level. But I don't know what's left for the doctor to do, but I feel like something extra until we move on to like a master's level entry or something.
What would we do? What would be different about the doctorate level? Teaching, maybe.
What do you like?
Like more of the
So like OT is master's, but they're moving towards a doctorate, right?
Mm-hmm. By 2020, I think.
So, and PT is already a doctorate, and they, depending upon the state, they can practice however they do.
Those are both clinical doctorate degrees, which means they have a lot more clinical hours than we do to practice.
So then we can't even.
They do take research classes, but I don't know how many they take. much they do. Not sure. They do way more hours than we do for rotations and stuff like that
Right now.
right now.
I was just thinking that you could, I wonder what their doctors, their professors.
Teach and do research, which is what we do. Let me rephrase, which is what we do if you're at a Research One institution, which we are here at Clemson. So we are required to do research here. But if I wanted to go teach at, say, Holly, not to totally call you out, but what's the name of that school that had the job position that you were looking at?
The one that I was talking about the last time we met.
Yeah, you were interested in applying for a job there?
Oh, the actual like professor job.
Yeah, what was that university?
It was Central Michigan University. It was where I did my undergrad.
And it's rec therapy, right?
Yep.
And they don't have graduate students, right?
Nope.
Yeah. So that institution, I don't know anything about it other than what she just said, is likely not a Research One institution. They're a teaching institution, so their professors probably teach a 4-4 load, so 4 classes each semester. They don't do research. They don't have time to do research. It's not part of their contract. There's no expectation for publications. Why was I talking about this? Oh, so in terms of like what PhD students in rec therapy need to learn, we need to learn how to do all of this, but the reality of when you go out and get a job as a faculty member is that depending on what institution you're at, you may or may not do any research. So I don't know if that's the same in PT and OT, that they could go to an institution where they wouldn't do any research, they would only teach. I imagine it's the same. I don't really know. But you know, Indiana University, Clemson University, Temple University, University of Utah, those are the 4 institutions that grant PhDs in rec therapy, and they're all Research One institutions, which means the doctoral students are learning how to do research like hardcore. And you know, some people don't want to go on and do research for their career as a PhD, as a faculty member. So they want to go to a Central Michigan and only teach, and that's fine too, right? But then the difference is that they're not doing research. They're not involving students in research. They teach in a university that doesn't have a graduate program. And so they don't have research happening elsewhere in their program, regardless of whether they're doing it or not. So for example, all of you in-person students who are involved in various research projects, because we have to do research. And so you get to be exposed to that. But at different institutions, it's not like that. And so again, we've talked about this in this class, where the educational experiences of rec therapy students, undergrad rec therapy students, are really different across the country depending on where you go. Whether or not you take a research methods class, who knows? You know, the standard 5 classes are pretty much the standard 5 classes across the board, right? For NCTRC, but beyond that, who knows what you're gonna get? And in some ways, it's the same at the graduate level. But all of that translates into our ability, or the differences in our abilities and skills of doing the job, right? Okay, now I gotta catch myself up on the chat.
Just random Westerns working on a grad program.
Whoop whoop.
Are they really? Yeah. Ugh. Just random. You could be teaching every day.
We can only pray that I'll get the job after all.
Are they thinking of like a 4+1 or a cool cutting edge, right? We're changing the culture of rec therapy around the world and around the country. And so 4+1 is very smart and economical. So it's a good way to go. Okay, back to our bridging the gap. Thinking of one of the quotes that in the McCormick article that said, a practitioner quote that said, researchers don't know the realities of practice, and so what they have to offer is not of any value to me, and it's not applicable to what I do. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I definitely think that like for my style, it was good that I went out and I've worked for 5 years in the field, so that when I become a professor, I know that I can give my students like life experiences in veteran, psych, substance abuse, geriatrics, community community outreach kind of thing, because I've worked in 5 different settings. I've worked in all these different places. So I feel like sometimes when researchers are doing research, it's like, okay, well, that's awesome. But like that, like, what is that? How do I put that into practice? I think some researchers who they went from school to school to school, and now they're teaching out of school. There are some who are in our profession like that. You know, maybe I feel like that, you know, as a practitioner, like if more professors or more of the research was coming out of people who have worked in the field, and maybe the mood or the theme of everybody's thinking would be like, oh, okay, well, this is great. Like, I'm going to actually read up on this person. I'm going to read up on Jasmine because she works with veterans. She's worked with veterans before. She knows what I'm struggling with. So therefore, it'll be easier for her to understand, you know, these are better than that or something like that. Like, sometimes it's really hard for me as a practitioner to read some of these articles and I'll be like, you're freaking kidding me when you want me to implement that, because that's never going to happen in my field, because they don't have to deal with some of the stuff that I think current practitioners are now dealing with, where budget cuts are really big and like our patients don't want to do that. They want to do this. Like, the culture of healthcare is changing as a whole as well. And so when they're not involved in the healthcare change, it's really hard for the research to continue to go with it if they're not practicing, I guess.
I think there's a fine line between, okay, wait, I gotta collect my thoughts here. Okay, so I agree with you. Faculty, and this is how I felt when I had teachers who, you know, just went all the way through and were trying to teach me about how to do the job of a therapist, but they never were a therapist. I was like, what? You know, I would much rather sit and listen to somebody talk about who's actually been, you know, boots on the ground type of a person, has a lot of experience to share in the classroom. I learn way better that way. So I totally and completely agree. I think where I disagree with you is that when practitioners look and they read things and they say, well, they don't know what it's like in my facility, and that's very fair. I do agree with that. A lot of times researchers don't know what the reality is in the facilities, or in very broadly the type of facility that they're making recommendations for, because they don't work in that facility on a regular basis or anything like that. So I do think that is fair. But when you then go the next step of saying, well, my facility won't do this and my patients won't do this and things like that, I think that's where we as practitioners, they're never going to do it. Our facility is never going to do it. Our patients are never going to do it if we don't implement a change, right? And so this is where, as practitioners and researchers, we can come together, that you and I, Shannon, can come together, and I can come and see you practice and watch you practice, not because I'm going to critique you or anything like that, but because I want to know what your daily life is. I want to know what Shannon does on a regular basis every day with her full caseload. So maybe I have to watch you for 2 weeks to understand what your caseload looks like, so that when I design an intervention that I think would be better than what you're doing, that it would fit within the reality of what you do. And maybe it would require you to make small changes to what you're doing. But that is how I envision research and practice coming together to create something that's realistic and feasible for a practitioner to implement, right? Because I'm not going to be the one implementing it. After we test that thing, I'm out of there and it's on you, right? So I would want to design something, and it never works the first time. So maybe we do it the first time and it's total crash and burn, and you tell me why, and the outcomes are all crappy. And well, of course, because we use the wrong instrument and we, too many times a week. And then they had to conflict with PT and OT and speech and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, let's change the design and try it again. And maybe it takes 3 or 4 times of me doing that with you until we get something that works. And then we test it one more time. Oh, it works again. Okay, I'm done here, and now it's yours. But if we never take that step of trying to change the culture in our places of work, it's never going to happen. I do understand that the VA is a completely different beast than a lot of the other places where rec therapists practice, and that might be, trying to climb up a very greased pole that it's never going to happen. As hard as you try, you're never going to get to the top of that pole, right? So, but if we don't try, we are somewhat complicit in the situation, right? So again, I think every researcher is different. As an applied researcher, I do try to understand the organizations that I'm trying to make recommendations for. Community rec, I want to know what it looks like. So I go and I spend my time in those places, and I work my summers. I spend my summers doing a lot of hanging out at places, not getting paid, but trying to understand how things work, so that if I'm going to do a study in that place, and usually I only go there if I am planning to do a study in that place, that I already know what it looks like, so that when I make recommendations, it fits within the flow of the program. And it doesn't, I'm not asking people to do a major overhaul of how they run their program, because that won't happen. And I get it. It won't happen. I mean, I agree. You don't have time for that. You don't have the resources for that.
I kind of want to share. Oh, was somebody else talking? Sorry.
Go ahead, Holly.
Okay. I was just going to say, last time when we met, we were talking about the our interviews with the other CTRSs, and I mentioned that I found out from like my previous internship supervisor that there was a job opening. Well, I interviewed last week and I got the job offer this week. Yay. So I'm so excited. And I one of the things in the interview I was talking about was my research project, because I'm going to be an inpatient psych, and one of the units is individuals with dementia with severe agitated behaviors, and that's like the population that my research project is going to be like that I'm researching. So they were super excited about it, because I was telling them I wanted to use like individualized music, and they're like, I don't know why, but we kind of stopped doing music programs. I don't know why, because we really like it. We understand that music is important, but we just stopped doing it. So they were like ecstatic in the interview that I wanted to do this research project. So I'm like, see, it's as easy as that. Like, I have to do it for school, but like, it's one of those things that it's something that is going to be part of my job. So why not try it? And they were excited about it. So that was just like one of those things, doing both.
Look at that. Research gets you a job.
Exactly. So
I was just going to respond to kind of what Shannon's brought up about people outside the field, or people that haven't worked in the field necessarily doing the observations. And it's been some of my experience that people that kind of come from a different world can actually be a little bit more objective about what they're seeing. I used to teach coaching supervision, and I would have nurses that said, well, I need a nurse to coach me. It's like, well, why would you need a nurse to coach you? So, well, because she knows where I'm coming from. But what I found is that sometimes when you put people that were too similar in there, their questions became more closed and more focused on their own assumptions and bias, versus really being curious about what's happening in the environment. So I could see some real strengths in having someone who's new to the environment looking at things, because you become so entrenched in the systems that you don't even know what's affecting what anymore, because it all just was like one big moving mess.
Totally. There's a term for that. Hang on one second. It's called like a naive questioner or something like that, where somebody doesn't know enough to just know what's going on. So they ask questions, but it's like all the right questions, right? Have you ever been in that situation where you're talking to somebody about something where maybe they know like this much about what you're talking about, but they're curious and they want to know more? So they ask just the right questions that get you to explain correctly and explain comprehensively what's going on. I'll say Marika, as my dissertation chair, she always asked me the right questions. Like, I assumed that she knew what I was talking about, but she didn't know what I was talking about. She seemed to just happen to ask the question that made me explain. And in the process of me explaining, I clarified my thinking and helped her understand more, right? So that's a naive inquisitor, naive questioner, whatever. They're not totally uninformed, just enough to ask the right questions. And this is what somebody could do for somebody in a research situation, whatever that research is, outcomes, program evaluation, who knows. I could come into a facility, do some observation, and then through the process of asking these questions, uncover a lot of potential issues where we could work together to create a solution through a research project to something. But somebody who is internal may not ask those questions, may just assume type of a thing, and then either nothing happens or something happens that is not useful. Not as useful as it could be if you had an outside person. It's always good to have an outside perspective. Okay, any other thoughts about this research practitioner gap?
I just agree with you. I think that if they would work together, if we could figure out more opportunities to bring researchers and clinicians together.
Wait, what? Say that again. Are you asking a question?
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry, somebody coughed, and so I didn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gosh, Claire. So I didn't hear half of what you said, so I was trying to follow along.
I agree with you, and I just think that if we have more opportunities to bring researchers and clinicians together, then more good can come out of it than not.
So how do we bring them together?
I feel like there are so many more clinicians than there are researchers.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like to change the culture, it really does start with not us specifically, but kind of, I mean.
It's your job, Hannah. You. It's all you.
But I mean, I don't know. I really like this is an advanced practice degree. We all had time, well, most of us had time to practice and then come and do all of this great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do feel like it's the people that are coming into the field that are going to change the culture. And if there are more opportunities like this and programs like this, I feel like we're going to be the ones who have to get our feedback on the ground and bring it from our perspective, almost like a fresh new thing. I don't know, is this making sense? When we go back into the workforce, because I feel like there's such a big, there's a lot of people who've been practicing for a really long time, and then I feel like now there's a lot of people coming into the field. So I feel like it's really the people who are coming into the field can really be the game changers.
Absolutely.
I feel like we have to show them the value of research, because when I read this, I was like, okay, well, everyone I've talked to, at least before, even just talking to last week, when we talked about our research questions and stuff, they didn't really value research like we value it. And I don't blame them, but that's the gap. We understand and we value it, and the clinicians don't really understand what it is.
But you were a clinician not so long ago.
Yeah, and so I didn't value it. So that's what we need to help them understand the value of it.
But not everybody is going to take this class. Not everybody's going to jump on the soapbox with us, right? Because
Well, that's why I think
I'm forcing you guys onto the soapbox in this
I
class.
start at undergrad level to really value it.
Well, it needs, personal opinion, it needs to be a master's degree. I mean.
Okay, but let's just say we got to come up with another way, right? Because this isn't going to happen anytime soon, this master's level entry thing.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen this year, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So how do we get practitioners and clinicians to come together to produce research?
I feel like we have to since we have been practitioners for however long or short, we have to go back into that mindset and say, what would I want a researcher to say to me? So for me, when I was reading the article and he was talking about subjective knowledge and objective knowledge, if we had more objective knowledge, we wouldn't have to explain ourselves so much. We wouldn't be so burnt out because nobody knows what we're doing, and we feel like we have to defend our existence. I feel like we have to kind of approach it in a way listen, if we get this research out there and we work together, then there can be more objective stuff, and we wouldn't have to do this anymore. You wouldn't have to be constantly explaining yourself. You wouldn't have to be struggling with your superiors or lack of support. I feel like almost, I hate that it's kind of coming from a negative corner, but I feel like you would have to kind of get to their emotional, I don't know, their level of where do we struggle? You wouldn't have to struggle as much if we could do this together, kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think I've said this a million times in this class. If not, I'll say it for the first time on the last day of class. You don't have to do this by yourself as a practitioner, right? There's no expectation that we do it all by ourselves. There is an expectation that you are able to consume research as an entry-level practitioner, support research, right? Those are the words that it says in the job analysis, that you can consume it, support it, and then produce it. But who's to say that has to happen by yourself? I don't think that it does. And so this is where I'm going to keep coming back to this question because I don't feel like we've answered it yet. if you don't feel like you have the skills for whatever reason, you didn't take a class or you took a research methods class in your undergrad and it's like way over your head, how do you get to the point where you can feel confident in producing something?
So, you know, in my environment, I mean, I've been in the field for a while, and I have to say that I've not felt comfortable even now. You know, I'm doing this so I can learn how to actually set up research projects that are, you know, ethical and that get us results, and that I can support other people in doing that. You know, I think long-term care, because it's so deficiency driven, that people are afraid that they're going to make mistakes and that they're going to do things that, you know, especially in research, you know, trying something new is scary in long-term care, because if there's nothing to back it up, you know, what can you do? So I think in some ways, you know, I look at everybody in this room, and I would consider this to be the leaders moving forward, especially at the level of education that you have. Exactly. So how do we empower other people to be comfortable in taking those risks? And then even starting that conversation. You know, I recently had a rec therapist reach out to me who wants to start an actual rec therapy program. So I had to talk to her about how to get doctor's orders, how to set it up. And then I said, well, you know, what are you wanting to have as far as your programs go? And it was something that she had a couple interventions in mind. And I'm like, well, you know, what's your criteria for coming into that group? And so I don't think I could have even had that conversation in such a pointed way, except for what I've already learned in one semester. So, I mean, if I hadn't have done that, one, I think it made her feel really confident in starting to build a program. And then, you know, creating that energy and saying, yeah, we want to do this and I want to partner with you. So I do think it takes each of us, you know, that whole, you know, to be a real cliche, you know, the be the change you want to see, you know, but it's kind of that. If it's difficult for people to do practice, we each need to start partnering with people out there. And that's what I see as my personal mission.
Okay, so you can partner with each other as practitioners to make changes, and you can partner with faculty members and graduate students to make changes. Again, there's no expectation that you do it all by yourself.
I was just on the partnering thing. I think it's also important to work well with other disciplines. I actually started research working with a nurse and a nursing professor. Who nursing is dabbling a lot into other disciplines, respectfully so. But the university that I worked with, she also happened to be a volunteer therapy dog owner. And so she was my therapy dog lady, mom. And she would come up on the unit as a therapy dog owner first and foremost, but then she was so intrigued with the way that we held the groups and that we did the processing aspects and we made it a therapeutic process, that she volunteered that she was also a nursing professor and that she wanted to do a research project.
And she had the knowledge and skill of how to do research, right?
And she would even say like she wasn't perfect at it and it was scary, and we put out an article and we got denied our first time and we're still working on it because no one's perfect, but we were able to do the research and we were able to work together and just learn and just do it. And it wasn't even a therapist, she was a nursing professor.
It's okay, it doesn't have to be. I mean, Marika does most of her research with an OT professor. Dun, dun, dun. No.
But
you know, but that's her, they were classmates in their PhD and in two different fields, but their PhD was rehab sciences. And so they work together and they are able to produce a lot of really good research that benefits both OT and RT, and that's okay to do. And so as practitioners, if you're doing something that lends itself well to working well with an OT or PT or whatever, go right ahead. Why not? Why not?
It's just good networking. Like I ended up speaking on professional panels with her and got hooked up with other disciplines and just like this big snowball effect.
I think another way we could start bridging this gap and connecting people is we have a lot of recreation therapy recreation Facebook pages. And there's certain key people that are always posting stuff, new materials, things that are interesting. Like you can even post like articles on there. People like scroll through it and read it in free time. And you can post like, I'm looking for someone to partner with. I'm a professor. Just connected over that way. So many people nationwide are on Facebook.
We have our listserv, recreationtherapy.net or something like that. I don't know, RecTherapyNet. It used to be called Atranet. Now it's rectherapynet.com or something. I don't know. Are you guys on it?
I tried and it won't let me get on.
Which one? Is that the Rec Therapy website or the actual website?
It's a listserv. It's not a website.
Oh, it looks kind of.
Never heard of it until now.
You don't know what a listserv is?
What? It just has like a bunch of lists for like schools. and
No.
stuff. No, not
No.
that one. What
You
is
guys
it?
are funny.
I've heard of it before.
It's like an email feed. Like whenever you want to post anything, like I posted when I was taking on interns for my thing, I sent it to the Adra listserv and then it blasted out to everyone.
Yeah, so if you join the listserv, I think there's something like 500 rec therapists.
Yeah.
Nation
But
on
you
the
have to
listserv.
request to be added, but I don't know who you're supposed to request anymore because I requested like 7 years ago. So I don't know.
You can find the directions to get on it through the ATRA website, but Oklahoma State is the one that Tim Passmore at Oklahoma State is the one that manages the listserv, and so you could always just contact him directly. But it's on if you go to the ATRA website and search, it should bring up directions. But anyways, like 500 rec therapists, you can join the listserv, and then if you have a question, I am a practitioner in a long-term care, and I'm interested in starting a research project to understand the outcomes of my rec therapy practice in this facility, and I'm looking for somebody to partner with me who lives in the same state. Kate, where do you live?
I live in New Hampshire.
In New Hampshire. Anybody rec therapist in New Hampshire? Luckily, that's a state with licensure, right? So there should be lots, hopefully. I don't know. New Hampshire's a small state though, right? So maybe not.
Very small state.
Yeah. So, but hopefully that there are some rec therapists in New Hampshire, and you could put that out on the listserv and it'll go blast it out. And then maybe somebody would respond and say, hey, I've done a project like this. I'm not in New Hampshire, but I'd love to partner with you on it. And you can do stuff from far away. Or, hey, I'm right down the road at this site. Let's do something together. Or, hey, I'm a professor at Clemson and this is my research area. I'd love to help you. And so the resources are there to partner with people so that you don't have to take that responsibility on yourself if you don't feel comfortable or confident in your skills. You can take small steps to build that confidence by partnering with other people who have the skill, whether that's another practitioner or faculty member or a doctoral student, or even a master's student who's really on top of it, not in their first semester.
Honestly, can I speak on the whole like confidence thing? Like I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, and I think that rec therapists should have to get a master's degree, because I feel like just in general, like example, my job interview, I feel way more confident talking about and like trying to sell what we do and like the reasoning behind it and all of these different like intervention programs and stuff like that, because I know more about like the theoretical frameworks and stuff like that, which you touch on in undergrad. But I mean, you have to consume so much information in your undergraduate between like different university requirements, whereas like your master's degree, it's just all therapeutic rec or everything, and it's a more in-depth understanding. So I understand why PT and everything else, why they have to go on and get graduate level degrees. It makes sense. So
you're not playing devil's advocate. You're preaching.
I'm just saying.
So.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I mean, a lot of people have different opinions and about the master's level entry, and personally, I'm all for it. But I think there are ripple effects that will change how we practice. It will change every education program across the country will change dramatically if we go that direction. But I do think that it has a huge potential to change this research practitioner gap by having people start practicing with a whole different skill set from the get-go.
I almost think that's the only thing that's like big enough of an impact to like actually change culture.
So, that was a strong statement, Hannah. Way to go. So it might only be going to master's level entry that is enough of a push to get us to change and actually start seeing research as part of our job our entry level competency, right?
So what would that require of the clinicians, like currently?
I mean, there would likely be some type of grandfather
Yeah.
type of a thing, you know, but
That'd be so weird.
But they have to. They do it for all the transitional.
Yeah.
yeah, it
Like,
gives,
there are
They
some
couldn't make
OTs
someone
that are
who's
bachelor's
55
levels.
go get
Yeah.
a master's. You know?
no, so OT is going through this right now, which is why it's not like a tomorrow master's level entry, everybody must have a master's degree. It's by a certain time point, everybody has to have that master's degree. All new people coming in have to have the master's degree. And then I don't know what they do about the old people, the previously, you understand what I'm saying.
It's just like for a couple of years at least, it would cause conflict for new people that would be kind of more educated than the clinicians. Which I mean, we're dealing with this now. Like,
Already
not-
dealing, exactly,
Yeah,
you're
I
already
mean,
dealing
we're
with
dealing
it.
this right now. Like,
I
it
mean,
would just maybe like make it a little more stagnant and awkward.
Sometimes though they give like a few years leeway, like this is going to happen in 2025. This is what it's expected of you.
I don't think it's a bad thing to have people with more education coming in though, right? Because
No.
what do you bring in? Just like
More
any new,
education.
but just like any new employee that comes into an organization, right? They're fresh blood, not like
Yeah.
fresh meat, let's tear them down. But
That's
they
why
bring,
take interns.
yeah, fresh ideas, fresh approaches to things. I've never looked at it this way. I've been doing 20 years of this type of an activity over and over and over and over again, and I have no ability to see beyond how I do it. And somebody else comes in and has a whole different approach. Okay, really good example. When I did my internship at the National Ability Center, I got assigned a case study, a woman there who had a traumatic brain injury, and she had, a very severe traumatic brain injury. She was an American Airlines pilot, and she was on vacation in Egypt, and they were on a bus going somewhere, and a tire blew, and it made the bus roll, and she got pinned under the bus, and her head was pinned between a rock and the bus. I don't know, it was very severe. She was life flighted from Egypt to Salt Lake City. Yeah, that's like a $500,000 bill, life flight. And then she was in a coma for like a year and all this crazy stuff. So she came out of that, but then has basically she was like an infant all over again, had to relearn how to walk and stuff like that. So she is not fully independently mobile. She has no verbal communication. She communicates with a thumbs up or a pinch or a punch or so she has still a lot of major functional deficits, right? So she's been coming to the National Ability Center forever and ever, and she comes and does their equine program and their swimming program, mostly just those two programs. And I got assigned to be her rec therapist in the equine program, and so I pulled out her notebook, right, her treatment notes, and it's just like years, right? And I think this is like what they do with all interns, is that they assign the intern to her. And so I'm just reading through years and years and years of notes on this woman, and everybody's doing the same thing year after year. And, they talk to her parents, come and bring her. She's an older woman, but her parents were her caregivers. And so they would talk to the parents, and her goals every single time were set by her parents, walking and talking. Well, dang. Walking and talking from a 6-week equine session? Are you serious? Could we come up with some more realistic goals here? So I was really discouraged to work with this woman because it just was like the same thing over and over again. And I didn't know if I had any new ideas. And so I went home after I got assigned her, and I just Googled her because I wanted to learn more about her accident and stuff. And I had been told that like the news came and did a whole segment on her. So I found some YouTube clips. I also stumbled across a blog that her parents started that none of the other interns had found. Oh my gosh, it just opened up like this whole like wealth of knowledge. They took her to China to have stem cell treatments to help regenerate her spinal cord because she also had a spinal cord injury and like a lot of nerve damage in her neck and all this stuff. Oh my gosh, I found so much information. And so I came back with that knowledge, and I wrote the link to the blog on her folder, and I said, anybody who works with her must look at this and read about it, because they were constantly updating it. They did all these really interesting, non-traditional, non-Western medicine alternative treatments to help her. But I felt like I felt almost like I was on an interdisciplinary team, even though I wasn't, right? I wasn't working with any doctors. I wish that I had been able to talk to her physical therapist and stuff and know what they were doing so that I could do something that would complement what they were doing. I was in the pool with her trying to work on range of motion. I was trying to get her to open her hand that she kept in a fist all the time, and sometimes would like punch out at people and stuff like that. And I was often in the line of fire on that, but we did a lot of stuff trying to get her to open her hand and like range of motion with her her leg, that all this stuff. But it wasn't until I found that information, new information, that I was then able to bring back to the facility and infuse that into her treatment. Right? So new people, new ideas, new approaches, that's really, really, really beneficial. So there's nothing wrong with having people of different education levels coming into places because they bring in new good information. Will it cause problems? You know, in my opinion, it shouldn't, but then we also have to deal with people's egos and personalities, and that's probably where a lot of problems stem from. But
I would have a concern that if we push for master's level before we get paid for our services through federal reimbursement, we might actually implode our profession. We might actually implode as a profession because OT, PT, they get paid for their services. And so when you look at, there was already a conversation in the chat board about, the cost of doing grad school, and that's not getting any cheaper. And the reality is rec therapists, as far as rehabilitative services, are the lowest paid out there. And then if we start requiring a master's degree, which is going to make it where it's going to be even more financially, the rate of pay is not going to go up until we can get reimbursed. And so, hopefully, if ATRA is pushing for masters, they need to be really, because it's been 20-something years that we've been promised that it was going to happen, and it still hasn't happened. So I feel like if we really get on this bandwagon about everybody has to have a master's level, geriatrics it said it was an adult/older adults, and then older adults being the biggest fields that we're in, it'll disappear. Other certifications like NCAP would take over, and we'll lose a whole field.
It has ripple effects. Across every setting, and I think there are some that we don't even know about yet. That once it happens, it'll be, oh crap, we didn't think about that type of a thing. Which is why it's not being made like this real freak decision. Let's just do master's level entry, right? And so, if you guys are unaware, ATRA is doing a study right now, an assessment to determine whether master's level entry is the way to go, and they're doing focus groups all over the country with rec therapists to find out what people think about this. What are those entry level skills? Is research one of those things? So, I will say I was in one of those focus groups when I was in Chicago a few weeks ago, and I totally was like, research. It is an entry level skill type of a thing. But this is not going to be like a rash decision all of a sudden, like PT does it, OT does it, so let's just do it. Because of exactly what you just said. There are a lot of people who 100% agree with that we will educate ourselves out of our profession.
Plus, to Katie's thing, like, most places don't require a CTRS to be their whatever rec therapist. Like when I worked at a private company, substance abuse, like I was the first ever CTRS they ever had. I also had my LRT, and so I kind of set the stone for that. But it was an ancestral company. Like everyone was sleeping together with everyone. So I left, which was good. But the person that they hired after me was not a CTRS, and they were called a rec therapist. Like they were just throwing the name around. So until, like with Kate, what Kate's saying is that until the pay gets there, as well as the requirement that like you can't call someone a rec therapist unless they have their CTRS/LRT or whatever you want to call it. You can't require a master's, because even in the government, like if I transfer to another VA hospital, whether it be like, so I'm in Tennessee, so if I transfer to Kentucky or like Indiana or whatever, and they didn't have a CTRS requirement, I could still be a rec therapist and do everything that I'm doing now, just not having a CTRS. Like, I could pretty much just forget my licensure and I'd still have a job regardless, because the government doesn't require it. So it's like, until there's like a overall, like private, public, federal, not everybody requires a CTRS and like a rec therapist. I don't really see that like happening as well. Even though I do want masters to be entry level, it's just that I hate it when someone comes up to me and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm a rec therapist. I'm like, oh, where'd you get your CTRS? And they're like, I don't have that. I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, well, okay, cool. Clearly, you're not what I am. So
Not cool. No, this is, I mean, it goes hand in hand with a lot of things, right? Nothing exists as an issue solely unto itself. Everything is integrated together. Okay, so unless we have licensure and certification mandatory across the board, then it does make it difficult to demand master's level entry and pay at the master's level. But until we have reimbursement across the board, well, I mean, in hospital and, you know, healthcare settings, because then we bring into the whole community side of things, and it's like, well, nobody's going to reimburse that, right? I don't know. So it starts to get really messy, but none of this exists solely by itself. There are so many issues here. And licensure and certification certainly is one of them, right at the top of that. So
I think
we say you've got to be a CTRS, you have to take the exam, you must go out and do this. Right now, currently, certification is voluntary, unless you live in a state with licensure. And there are only 4 states, right? So come on, the rest of you 50 nifty United States, get your crap together.
So maybe that is like first step is requiring licensure, because like all of those points are valid for sure, that like we don't have reimbursement. Like in order to get it, we have to pump out the research. So like that's where the wheel keeps turning and turning. It's like, how do we break the wheel?
It's an endless cycle of torture. Somebody was going to say something.
Well, I was just going to, how are we right now as a field differentiating ourselves from occupational therapy? Because I think that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. Because if we do, like I said, my worry is that because they are already qualified to do our job, and actually, so, and I think I brought this up before, the state of Massachusetts requires a certified rec director for memory care units. And that can be either a CTRS or an activity director. If they're not certified, then they can have a consultant once a month. The consultant, now this is in the recreation language, has to be an OT. I can't even as a CTRS consult with my own staff because I was written out of the regulations in Massachusetts.
Okay, so I will say this to speak to that. I don't have an answer for that, but I will say this. Recreational therapists are not good advocates for themselves. Is that a dog?
Yeah.
Like right outside our door?
Probably Ari.
Oh, that was in the room.
So recreational therapists we're not good advocates for ourselves as a you know, broad like from a broad level, right? Individually, people can advocate for their profession. You know, some people do a really good job individually advocating for rec therapy as a profession and such. But as a whole, as a field, we have not been a good advocate for ourselves. How did OT and PT get legislation passed to get reimbursement, but we didn't? We had people, what are those people called? Lobbyists and stuff like that. There at some of the same times. And my understanding, I got a little bit of a history lesson when I was at IU about this. But for whatever reason, RT wasn't listed as a reimbursable service for CMS. Why? Did we not pay the lobbyists well enough? You know, are we not knocking on enough congressmen and senators' doors to get things?
Well, that's what we did pay the lobbyists for.
That's what we pay them for, but
So
where is rec therapy? Why is it not listed?
That's not because we only had one.
I don't actually know like the hard and fast reason why, but I think what I'm trying to get at though is that we didn't do a good enough job way back when, and that when things started to change in healthcare, we didn't change with it. We didn't keep up with it, and now we're trying to fight against a lot of things that have already been put in place. That, you know, it's this uphill battle, take one step, slide back 3 steps type of a thing, right? And so we're trying to catch up. We're doing a lot of catching up. So much so now that OT has written into their scope leisure and recreation, right? And so now, how do we fight against that? So I just Googled. The occupational therapy scope of practice, and it brought up right here AOTA, so the American OT Association, I guess, definition of occupational therapy, defines OT as the therapeutic use of everyday life activities with individuals or groups for the purpose of participation in roles and situations in home, works, school, workplace, community, and other settings. There, it doesn't say anything about recreation or leisure. I also Googled recreational therapy scope of practice, and who did it bring up? OT. The ATRA, whatever, describes rec therapy as treatment, service designed to this, and this. Protecting OT's scope of practice vis-a-vis rec therapy. Oh geez, what is this?
Oh god, no. What is that?
They're trying, I don't know, are they like trying to claim us as we work under them? Who are you, Chrissy Vogely? I already don't like you.
Similar to the definition of OT.
Okay, so here they are. ATRA describes rec therapy as treatment, service designed to restore, remediate, and rehabilitate, blah, blah, blah. Sound familiar? That statement of meaning 2015, as the association calls it, is eerily similar to the definition of OT, as if we stole it from them.
Yeah.
Although rec therapy and occupational therapy both trace their roots back to the same beginnings, I don't know where OT traces their roots back to. The professions have evolved differently. Rec therapists focus on play and leisure as a means for therapy and can even be grouped into community rec instead of healthcare. Currently, recreation therapists are seeking licensure throughout the country in order to be legally recognized as a profession. Because their description of rec therapy is so similar to the model definition for occupational therapy, AOTA and state occupational therapy associations must be vigilant in monitoring any recreation therapy licensure legislation that is introduced. There are lobbyists who work for OT who go, I know this is happening, I learned about this when I was at IU as well, who go to their senators and congressmen and saying, if anything RT comes through, you shut that down. They pay their lobbyists to do that.
On their website?
Yeah, it's on their website.
It's like villainized this.
We do this to ensure that the rec therapy scope of practice does not encroach on the OT scope of practice and that the rec therapy language defines a distinct scope of practice. Legislators need to be educated about the important differences between OT and rec therapy, including educational experience requirements. I 100% agree with that last sentence. Totally agree. Currently, DC, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Utah have licensure for rec therapy. Washington State has registration, which is a level less than licensure. Wow, these people know a lot more about rec therapy certification and licensure than some of our students do. I mean, I'll just throw that out there. In 2016, 2 states, Kentucky and Pennsylvania, introduced legislation that licensed recreation therapists.
What is title protection?
That is licensure. No, that's CTRS. CTRS is title protection and licensure is practice protection. Each time legislation is introduced, AOTA works with the state association on a strategy for dealing with the legislation. This can include submitting testimony to the state legislature, lobbying the legislators, crafting amendments with alternative language, and organizing a grassroots effort. AOTA does all of that we can to provide support to the state associations in order to protect OT scope of practice. Not all legislation, however, has been created equal. The enacted statute in Oklahoma, for example, clearly defines rec therapists as using recreation and leisure activities as treatment. Therapeutic recreation or rec therapy means the specialized application of recreation to assist with treating and or maintaining the health status, functional abilities, recreation and leisure activities, and ultimately the quality of life for individuals hospitalized or receiving treatment, blah, blah, blah. AOTA and state associations would be less likely to oppose a licensure bill like Oklahoma's, which has a specific definition that does not encroach on OT's scope of practice.
Why do they say that?
Because Oklahoma's scope of practice for rec therapy is more clinical, less rec and play.
Oklahoma, like, read this?
I don't know, but go back up here and see. Their interpretation of what rec therapists do is rec therapists focus on play and leisure as a means for therapy and can even be grouped into community rec instead of healthcare.
That's like so weird.
But it's kind of true for some rec therapists.
Yeah.
It's true for some rec therapists, right? I think for a lot of people who, you know, if you think back to like the philosophical split in our profession, this is one side of our philosophical split, right?
I just read an article that was on parentsmap.com about, it was from 2011, and it was doing outdoor recreation and hiking for individuals with disabilities. And so it's a social magazine. And they clearly mapped out the difference between rec therapy and therapeutic rec. This was in 2011.
Do you think that they like can make it so that that comes up first underneath the definition? Probably.
Well, dang, I know. Why, when you
that's horrible.
when you Google rec therapy scope of practice, does it come up with OT first?
Because they probably
Let's
can
hope our
control that.
lobbyists aren't reading that instead of.
Well, they probably, I bet they can control that.
You paid for that ad we popped up. earlier.
Yeah, so they're like really trying to.
Dang.
You pay for to be that top spot, right? Okay, so this is NCTRC's scope of practice for rec therapy. The primary purpose of rec therapy practice is to improve health and quality of life by reducing impairments of body function and structure, reducing activity limitations, participation restrictions, and environmental barriers of the client served. The ultimate goal of rec therapy, it does. The ultimate goal of rec therapy is to facilitate full and optimal involvement in community life. The scope of rec therapy practice includes all patient, client services of assessments, planning, design, blah, 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 blah. Oh, look, research and education for either individuals or groups that require specific therapeutic recreation or rec therapy intervention. This scope of practice represents, at a minimum, the process and knowledge base delineated in the most recent job analysis study and delivered by CTRS consistent with professional standards of practice and code of ethics. So this is a lot less focus on rec and play and more that is just one tool in our toolbox to achieve optimal well-being. I don't know, guys and girls. I don't have an answer to this one.
We have a lot of
But
work
clearly,
ahead of us.
what's that?
We have a lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah. I mean, there's no easy answer to this. And I will say that I may be painting a picture that makes it seem like ACTRA's not doing anything about it. There are task force, like committees, not task force, committees. There's a licensure committee. There's a task force for the master's level entry. There are people who are working on this and have been working on it for a long time, but it is not an easy fix. And when we don't do things like pay for the first search coming up, I don't know how the differences between what our people are doing as opposed to what the OT people are doing. I just have heard through the grapevine. Got a little history lesson at IU. It's kind of fun being, you get to study under like the mothers and fathers of rec therapy, like Peg Connolly and stuff like that, and Brian McCormick and Dave Austin. You learn a lot about how things were way back when things first started. And basically, we just didn't do a good job in the beginning of advocating for ourselves and fighting at the time when like strike when the iron was hot type of a thing. And so now we're fighting an uphill battle. And we're battling against OT when we should be not doing that. We should just be doing our own thing. And so when we talk about licensure, certification, master's level entry, it's all, and reimbursement, it's all related. It's all goes hand in hand, which is why it's so important that I think, bringing it all the way back around, right? That we know how to do research and find out what it is that we're doing. What are we doing and what impacts does it have on our clients? Because if we can clearly articulate that, maybe we could clean up this scope of practice mess, right? Maybe we could better show the need for master's level skills and knowledge as an entry level. We could better advocate for reimbursement. Man, research seems to save the world. I don't know if
it would be a good idea. Like when I finally took the step of presenting at a conference, I presented with Jake, and then after that I did it on my own. Like maybe that could just be the link, just having a discussionary thing at every conference where we're kind of sent out to talk about this and then talk about that. Because I feel like if you throw it in the practitioners' faces, like your job's about to be crushed if you don't do something. Like that's kind of a wake-up call to the older folk who are, been working 20, 30 years, like who are set in their ways, as well as these younger kids who think that they're just doing rec therapy just to get to PT and OT school. Like it would be nice to just do like a reality check with them. Like if some people want to partner up and like go to conferences and talk about them, I think ACTRA, or I think NCTRC should like make that a course, like approve of it or whatever.
or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
I will say, when I was in Chicago, I was at this this conference to recruit grad students, and I sat in on a couple of sessions. And one of the ladies' sessions that I sat in, Teresa Beck, she's a faculty member at Grand Valley State University, and they have a rec therapy program there, an undergrad program, and they're now building into a grad program as well.
They were huge in Chicago.
Yeah, and she is somehow involved in the task force that is doing the master's level entry study right now. And so she presented all this information, and she did this is what PT is doing. This is what OT is doing. This is how they got there. This is why they went on to master's level, then doc level entry. It was so interesting. I was like, well, dang, everybody needs to know about that. Every rec therapist needs to understand why they went on. And she painted this really good picture that OT didn't go to a doctoral level just because PT went to the doctoral level. Maybe in some ways they did, but and so she made a real distinction between degree creep and maturation of a profession. Like, are we moving to the master's level because we are maturing as a profession, right? It's been 50 years-ish, 60 years. And we now know that we need to have more skills, more knowledge to be entry level. And so we're going to mature into a master's level entry. Or are we doing it because OT did it and PT did it, and now, we got to do it. We're allied professions with them, our sister professions, our cousin professions, whatever, that we have to do what they're doing. Because if we don't, then people will look on us as the less credible, what are all the things that we talk about right now, right? They don't take us seriously. They don't pay us the same, all these things, right? So are we potentially considering this for maturation reasons or degree creep reasons?
Probably both.
I think a little bit of our hand is being forced, and that's degree creep.
Did speech therapy just become masters like within the last couple of years? I know they're only masters. No,
I'm not sure. She talked about them too, but I can't remember.
Dietetics just came in 2017.
She did point out that what a master's degree is now, what a bachelor's degree was 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Right.
The
So
bachelor's
40
degree is
years.
in high school.
Yeah.
That's what
40
I'm-
years ago,
That's what
nobody had a
I just
bachelor's
thought,
degree.
Like speech, they're like only in a master. Like we don't really talk about speech that much, but like I just thought of them like they're only in a master's, they're not a doctor,
Mhm.
and they don't really research. I mean, they learn the skills because my friend's getting that degree right now, and like when they taught me how to do my stats because they like learned it,
Mhm.
but like they literally don't have to do research as much. Like they like get equipped in the master's level, since it's a master's level, but then when they get out in the field, they won't have to do research or anything at like a master's level. And then they aren't required to get a thesis or anything like that. So it's just definitely different for speech therapy.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering what year I thought it was kind of recent. But they, at a bachelor's, you can't do anything with your degree.
Mhm.
So.
One the issue now is if this whole like tax bill thing passes, it's gonna be like low
Mhm.
thousands, and I mean people won't be able to afford. I mean, I can't really afford it. If it weren't for assistantship and stuff, then I wouldn't be here either. But like, if things like that were to actually happen, I
Mhm.
mean, there would be a lot less rec therapists. 'Cause-
Mhm. Well, there wouldn't
No,
unless
I mean,
we
if
move
it
to
was a
master's level.
degree, like if it was master's and people couldn't afford to get a master's, then
It's where the 4+1 becomes really,
yeah,
really economical,
yeah.
right?
It's probably like one of the few reasons.
I think that was a strategy to remove the equivalent of high school association. You know what I mean? Like the
No.
equivalents.
When the equivalent.
Like when you said a bachelor's is the equivalent of a high school.
Mhm.
Like I lost it. I was just gonna say it was a solution. We talked about it earlier in the grad lab.
The tax one?
Yeah, it's not a solution.
Oh,
But
like, oh,
they're
yeah.
making it.
But they're making it a solution. They're like, well, if everyone's educated, it'll just stop them from being educated.
Well, the problem is that only rich people will be able to get educated, not people
That's
who
what
are
they want.
intelligent enough to,
Mhm. It's true.
But I think, so recreational therapists though that practice in clinical settings, versus maybe community, I don't know, whatever, who are practicing alongside of other disciplines that are also now required to have greater degrees and more skills required of them. I think that that's a gradual increase of the demands on our behalf as rec therapists. I feel like, you know, we're being paired up with treatment team members that bare minimum have masters, but yet we're supposed to be standing next to them. So I think that that's also a reason why.
In some ways that's a maturation thing,
Yeah.
right? That if I'm expected to be able to do these things, I need to learn them somewhere. If that's not happening at the bachelor's level, but that happens in a master's degree, but a master's degree is optional, maybe it shouldn't be. If the job expectation requires that I do these things, but I didn't learn them, then I'm not doing the job.
Wasn't that part of the OT thing that like you need to be clear on the level of education they have versus what we have? Like, so they're saying, you know, they're gonna have to get a doctorate, and then we're coming in, and so that's kind of like, in a way, that's kind of us being like, well, CRNA shouldn't be able to do it. So like, unless they get the educational requirements. So I'm not saying what they're saying.
No,
right,
yeah.
but like, you know what I mean?
They're linking the degree differences to a negative, you know, and like there's a ton of other providers that don't even like, sorry, I'm on nurses this evening, but like nurses are still like, a bachelor's degree is not required. You for an RN, it's not. So you have people who are dealing like on floors that just have associate degrees, unless you work for a Magna facility.
No,
Not here.
If you have an associate's degree, actually, you can only get CNA, the certified nursing assistant. You can't get
You
to
can
an
get
RN.
LPN. You can at an associate level, so the LPN program is usually an 18-month program. The associates, which is a 2-year, you can have just an associate's degree in nursing, but to be a BSN, you have to have a bachelor's. And but the only difference between an LPN and an RN is that an RN can hang backs. I mean, the regs have said that you need RNs for supervision, but everybody works in the floor. But they get away with it because there's a shortage. We don't have enough nurses out there. There's, you know, I don't think the shortage of us has happened yet. Because you know, most states, you know, I mean, I keep kind of busting on my own field, but I'm hoping it's because we can elevate it. You know, in Massachusetts, you need an interest.
You need a what?
An interest. That's what the state of Massachusetts regs say, that you, in order to be an activity director in the state of Massachusetts, you need to have an interest. The federal regs are actually higher than the state regs in the state of Massachusetts.
An interest in activities?
Pretty much.
Oh.
That's actually
Oh, like you just need
You
an
have to be
interest.
interested in it.
Yeah, you're interested in it. You like it.
I was going to say, here in Colorado, there are very, very few LPNs, and pretty much they're hiring them, like you said, because of the BSN shortage. And as soon as they can get an RN or BSN in that position, then they're tickled to pieces. But we have very few LPNs in our facility because they cannot do the same job legally as the BSN. So, and wow, your regs are pretty wild there, Kate.
Well, I mean, they're wild everywhere when you start looking at them. I mean, we the federal standards are higher, and we go to those though. But yeah, it's crazy.
So I hope that we don't walk out of class today thinking, what the crap did I decide going down this rec therapy road? That is not the intent of this discussion. The intent was maybe to just shine a light that, as Jake said earlier, we have a lot of work to do, right? And the intent coming out of this class as a whole is that research could fill a lot of the gaps, could help support a lot of the efforts that we're making to strengthen our profession, standardize our practices, to clarify our scope of practice, you know, a lot of things, right? Research can contribute. It's not the fix all for everything, you know, but it can help in a lot of ways. but it has to be, in my opinion, applied research, which is why I created this class. And luckily the other faculty agreed that this was an important class, which is why this is the only class in the country that is taught like this. And so we feel that applied research in practice, not this like abstract world research that never goes anywhere beyond being picked apart by other researchers type of a thing. Interesting, contributes in its own way, but is not what we need to help our profession move forward. We need applied, boots on the ground research. We need to understand what our outcomes are. And a lot of other things that we spent the whole semester talking about, but mostly outcomes, right? Outcomes research is what is going to directly tie into reimbursement. It's going to tie into our scope of practice. It's going to tie into our legislation and certification. This is what we do, and this is what happens when we do it.
Absolutely.
What's that?
Completely agree. I mean, that's why I think I think you're absolutely right. This is the key to all those things that are going on in my head, is that we've got, and I think delineating our field is going to be critical. What do we do that's different that no one else can do? And then how does it benefit? Especially if we can, if we can start really tying ourselves to true outcomes that the payers are interested in, it's going to be critical. How do we help reduce rehospitalizations? How do we lower healthcare costs? How will we get people healed faster and out in the field, and then they stay at home longer? We've got to be doing meaningful research around things that people are interested in.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I hate to say this, but they don't reimburse for play, right? They don't reimburse for fun. So as much as that is sometimes an outcome of what we do, that cannot be the outcome that we're trying to achieve. Man, I'm sure there are people who would totally disagree with what I just said, but because recreation and leisure is a domain in our life, right? And we need that time to just play. But when we're talking about the healthcare industry, and I realize that we function as rec therapists in more than just the healthcare industry, and this is why so many people were unhappy with NTRS being disbanded and only having ATRA, because they felt like ATRA didn't represent the community side of rec therapy, but we're on the verge potentially, if we don't do anything about this, of, as Kate said, our profession disappearing because other professions are going to, kind of kill us off.
Yeah, I'm sure you got the emails from Jen too, but it's like last year or the year before, we were getting a lot of emails from Jen saying that North Carolina was voting, and there was potential that North Carolina was going to lose their licensure.
Mm.
I mean, and it was like we all were supposed to be calling and voting, and
it was because they were going to take away all licensure. So nobody was going to have all licensure. No one. I asked when Jeff got it, but it was because no one. They were going to take all licensure away.
vote for
Not just rec therapists,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
who?
For anyone, for massage therapists,
Social workers.
Yeah, social workers. Nobody was going to have licensure in North
Why?
Carolina. I don't remember what the reason was.
Weird.
But they were taking
They
it
didn't,
all.
obviously.
They didn't
pass,
pass.
but it was just
They were going to take it all away. So
kind of
obviously
panic
we were
to
going to get the
me.
boot too.
Well, yeah, and it was kind of a panic to me because I had just graduated and I was trying desperately trying to find a job where I wasn't activity director, which never ended up happening. And then I'm like, oh, I just got my licensure and they're gonna take it, and it was just felt like, what did I do? What did I get myself into? Because I started out in nursing, and it's respected, and I don't know how this works, but it's a whole different ball game. Whereas,
but we're a young field too. I have to
that's
say,
the
we're a
thing,
young field, and
yeah.
maybe we're in the growing pain stage still, right? How long has nursing been around?
Hundreds of
Right,
years.
forever,
Yeah.
right?
But that's my point, is that, it's because I love rec therapy that I was I'm doing it, taking the plunge kind of thing. But that was such a panic moment, graduating, finally getting my degree, and then I can't find a job to save my life, and then my licensure that I've just paid, $100 for whatever is going to be taken away. It's, I don't know. It's panic inducing for sure. It's kind of hard to grow. I've talked to people that were my residents and stuff that have gone, that were, you know, I kind of encouraged to get into rec therapy, and a lot of them can't find jobs. And it's, you know, I feel like there's so many, you know, the work is more than just, I mean, research is a huge part of it.
Absolutely. I'm not
Like,
saying that
there's
research
so
is
many
the.
little things, you know, where
There's
there's
a
so
lot.
much work to be done. It's kind of overwhelming.
But that's why no one person is in charge of all of it.
True,
This
true.
is why we have our membership. As a grassroots organization, we rely on our membership to help do this. So this is where coming out of a class with research knowledge and skills, when you see something come out from ATRA saying we need people to sit on these committees, sign up. You have skill that they need. You have skill that they could really, really use to help achieve the goals of that particular committee, which then achieves the goals of ATRA at the broader level, right? And I mean, it's not a crap ton of work to be on these committees. I mean, maybe if you have something like what the master's level entry task force is tasked with, that's a big thing, but it's just big right now, and then eventually it will go away. But I serve on the Research Institute Committee, you know. There's a lot of student things. So I serve on the Research Institute Committee, so I put on the Research Institute at the conference every year. I accept all the submissions and accept, reject all of the research proposals and everything. It has times of intense busyness, but other than that, it's not really that much. But there are opportunities to influence. And with master's degrees, PhDs, we have skill and knowledge that the vast majority of rec therapists don't have, because the vast majority are bachelor's level education. So we have a perspective into things that is unique. So go forth and change the world. That's what I'm trying to say. And do research while you're at it.
People are really receptive to like what we do. Like once you explain it, everyone asks what we do. But like I'm finding, I mean, I've always sort of found this, but like more recently I've just been explaining myself in different places, and they're like, oh my gosh, that is really amazing. Like your job sounds awesome. You're like, this is so cool. It should be more mainstream, and like people are really open to it. And then I think that's important because it's like a totally different side of movies.
It seems crazy to me that they're like, and most people don't know what it is. You know, how often, because it seems like we have a national organization, we have conferences, we have like, you know, programs in different colleges all over the country, and it's just people, there's so many people that still say, what's that, you know? How do you not know what it is?
How many nurses are there, do you think, in the country?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, not enough, right? But that's a side issue. But how many, if we had to guess how many nurses there are in the country?
Probably like 700,000.
Yeah, can somebody Google it and see if there's a number that we can find?
So they're required for every healthcare facility.
3.1 million RNs in the U.S.
Okay.
That's RN.
That's RN, not BSN.
And an RN is.
RN though
You
is,
can have a registered nurse, but you can get it with a.
but an RN is the licensure. So you can have a person with that's
Yeah,
an
they'll
RN
still
that
be
has
a
a
BSN.
bachelor's degree, and then you
They're
can
just
have
a
an
type of
RN that's an
RN, right?
associate's degree, but they're still
BSN
RN.
is a type of RN. But it's a,
So,
it's
yeah,
an
it's just
RN
like
with a
in a
bachelor's
branch.
degree. Yeah.
Like RN, and there's like like there's different.
BSN is the one where you've gone. to
So
get
more than
RN
3
bachelor's.
million. And then probably a whole bunch more of the almost RN, whatever. LPN. Okay, so anybody want to Google how many recreational therapists there are in the country?
There's actually 19.3 million nurses in the country.
Of all the different levels? Okay.
That probably includes like nurse practitioners. And, like,
I'm
That's
gonna-
funny. I googled the RN one, and it popped up right at the top, and I said, "How many recreation therapists are there in the U.S.?" And there's not. It doesn't pop up.
I didn't think it was.
you know, like the Bureau, the Labor
Yeah.
Bureau, something. like that.
BLS, the Bureau of Labor and
Yeah.
something. BLS.gov.
18,100.
Okay.
How old is that though?
It's more than I thought.
They
No,
probably-
that's about how much it
2016.
is. That's about how much it is. There's, when I was in Chicago, I saw a
You could
presentation.
like go to a room. You could fill that whole like in a stadium and like meet every rec therapist.
Yeah, that'd be kind of
Friggin'
cool. Clemson Stadium holds like what 80,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could fill Clemson
Maybe
And then
a
with the majority of it left over.
There are 20,000 students at Clemson, undergrad and grad. Okay, so our
2,000
student
less.
our student body is the same as all rec therapists in the country. I was going somewhere with this. Hang on.
That shows how little of us there are.
Exactly, which is why it's not well known,
You know,
right?
it's crazy. The most that they have in any one state is 1,700.
What state is that?
California.
Oh,
It's
I
a big
believe it.
state.
And then New York, and then Pennsylvania, and then Illinois, and then Massachusetts.
Mhm.
Weird dispersion of
Isn't it?
I took
None
that
of them
to
went to Flex
HR
Section,
one year to get a raise. I took all that to HR, and I was like, "Here."
So I'm just going to go back to, I hope that you guys don't think that you chose wrong or anything like that. That was not the
Oh,
intent
that's what
of
it
this
sounds
discussion
like.
today. It was meant to talk about what this gap is between researchers and practitioners.
I found out how many are in the country. 19,200.
Yeah, there's roughly 20,000.
Well, and then there's gonna be like a bunch graduating in December. Hopefully that'll move us up to 20.
We don't have 1,000 people in this program.
Yeah.
Right.
That was 2016.
So
Is
Much-
this program growing? Like, do you guys see it? Because our UT, it's grown exponentially. Like, we get,
Western
in
Europe,
my program,
Colorado.
there were like 50 students, and there's like triple that now.
So I'll just tell you, in my time here at Clemson, our program has exploded, but that's because before I was here, there was no graduate coursework for rec therapy. There was a graduate program, but no coursework. I don't know how that works, but so the first time I taught this class, there were 3 students in the class. The second time I taught it, there were 6 students. The third time I taught it, there were 8 students. No, third time I taught it, sorry, this is the 4th time this year. Third time I taught it, there were 42 students. And
Did
then
you say 42?
42 students.
When
Like
I visited-
online.
In
when I
this
visited,
class.
there was one person in the program though.
Yeah, and then this year there are, how many of you are there? I've got about 14 in class this year. So the program is growing. We had like a bumper year last year, and we were like, whoa. We cannot have 42 people in this class. It was a little problematic. And so we had to kind of tone some things down so that we could have an acceptable number to get through. I was like, 42? How am I going to teach this class with 42? So yes, it is growing. The online portion is growing bigger than our in-person, but that's just because in-person is always tied to funding. Not always, but I mean, we do have people come who are unfunded, but, and then now we have our 4+1, which is growing as well. So
So would that like explore an opportunity to get away from the Parks and Rec department?
we actually like being in this department here.
We do.
Really?
Mhm. We as the faculty who make that decision. I mean, students, you guys have opinions,
But like, would OT like see that like?
I had heard.
there's
that
no
that
OT
was-
program here.
I mean, but like in the scope of like occupational therapy PT, like they see that as not being clinical when we're like in a leisure-based program.
I mean, to me, it's kind of weird that the master's degree is going to say master's science and PRTM when it's, to me, such a, it's a healthcare.
I don't have any degrees in recreational therapy.
What? Say that again.
I don't have any degrees in
What?
recreational therapy. My bachelor's degree is in history and PE. My master's degree is in youth and family recreation, and my PhD is in leisure studies
How did you sit for your CTRS?
because I took all the classes and I did an internship.
That's right, you told us that.
Technically, my concentration, my minor or my concentration in my PhD was rec therapy, but the
could that be
degree
a
says leisure
negative,
studies.
like, could that be seen as a negative? Is we're not getting like standardized education?
Well, there are efforts
No,
to
but
standardize
that's
the
like
education through accreditation.
Education
With,
anywhere.
yeah, but there are efforts to standardize the education through accreditation programs for like CART, but that is an optional thing at this point.
But like if it moves to a master's, wouldn't everybody have to have the same?
It would change accreditation requirements. So CART right now only applies to undergrad. It doesn't apply to the master's level. But it would change everything. It will change how we educate people, and it will change how we practice. Moving to the master's degree or moving to the PhD. Would it change dramatically how we practice going from a leisure Parks and Rec department to a rec therapy department? I don't know. Our undergrads here take 10 classes in rec therapy. And I don't know many other RT departments that offer 10 classes, 10 RT classes. So we're lucky here at Clemson that rec therapy is like highly supported. And so we have the options to, well, we have the resources in the form of 5 faculty members that we could teach that many classes and offer that much. And a lot of other programs don't have that many faculty members to be able to offer that many classes. And so I guess in that sense, maybe it doesn't matter what department you're in. It's more about how many faculty you have.
Yeah.
I do think that rec therapy is growing. Somebody said that on there, Gina, 7% every year, or just in the last year. Just saw something about 7%. It is growing, I think, as our healthcare industry changes and the kind of practice is less time in inpatient and more time in, a quicker transition to outpatient. It changes how we work with people, right? We have to be able to work with people in community settings, which is why that clinical versus community is not the right way to think about things. What we do is a clinical process, and we do it in whatever setting we're in. And so it's going to be shorter and shorter in formal healthcare settings, and it will be more and more in, less formal community settings. And so I think there's going to be a growing need for recreational therapists. Now, whether, again, educated at the master's level, at the bachelor's level, who knows?
So Dave Austin put something out a few months ago about.
Dave Austin.
I can't imagine it was Forbes magazine that listed rec therapy as like one of the 30 top growing.
No, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, CNN Money listed it as like a top 10 profession, fastest growing professions. And
Not
then
like money-wise, just like growing in the field.
There was a big
growing numbers. We have it on our website, the Clemson website. There's like 3 or 4 different businessy type things like that ranked professions as like the most useful professions. Like if you have to go out and get a degree right now that has the best return, like the quickest return would be a bachelor's level, something that has a return at the bachelor's level, right? So you don't have to go on and get the advanced degrees. Well, rec therapy falls in that. Yeah. Which is part of the reason why people argue don't go to a master's level, because people aren't going to be able to afford to go on to that. Like you mentioned, it effectively reduces people who are of lower SES from being able to go on because they don't have the money to go and do that. And so that historically in our country are women and people of color. So it's going to change the demographics if that's potentially how it goes. So there are repercussions everywhere, ripple effects. I just like to call it ripple effects, right? Can't throw a rock in the pond without causing ripple everywhere, okay?
It's hard because right now I feel like we're not getting paid more to have a master's. Like if I went and applied for a job, I actually know somebody who went through this. She had a master's, and it happened that the job opened twice, and 2 entry level, like fresh out of internship, got the job before she did. And that may be because of her personality. I don't know. There may be other factors, but like just because you have a master's, you're going to get the job at this point. So.
Well, I used you as an example when I was talking to our undergrads a couple of months ago about considering our 4+1 program, and that if our profession goes to a master's level and you've gone through and done our 4+1 and you get that master's level with only 1 extra year, you're ahead of that 8 ball, right? And I said, we have a student in our master's program right now who, right, because you said that like way at the beginning that you lost a job because you didn't have a master's degree. And I said that. I was like, she lost a job. I don't know the details of that. And I said, she joined our master's program because she didn't want to ever find herself in a situation where she was being threatened with losing a job because she didn't have the degree, a high enough degree. And all the students were like, and I was like, oh crap, did I just like anxiety? Everybody, they're all freaking out.
They're all like,
And Utah has done a good job with actually the scaling up of rec therapy in their regulations. You actually have to be a certified recreational therapist to do in long-term care to do that job as a rec director in Utah. And if you don't have one, you can have a master's level consult.
Yeah.
So something worked right in Utah.
Yeah. So Utah has a whole different setup. They have
Yeah.
an MTRS. They're the only state that has an MTRS, and that's a Master's Therapeutic Recreation Specialist. You have to have a master's degree in order to get the MTRS. It's a licensure thing, not a certification thing. It doesn't go through CTRS and CTRC. Sorry, it's licensure through the state. So they actually have 3 levels of licensure. It's MTRS. You have to have a master's degree. CTRS is the bachelor's level, and you have to be certified. You have to be CTRS to get both of those. And then they have a TRT, which is a therapeutic recreation tech. And so you can have an associate's degree to be a TRT.
So I can go there and not have a master's. And
You could be an MTRS. And so you can supervise interns with an MTRS.
you can't without.
I don't think so. Do you know?
That's good.
Kate?
You have a question.
Can you supervise interns as a CTRS in Utah, or do you have to have the MTRS to supervise interns?
I think you have to have the master's level certification.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is CTRSs, even at the bachelor's level in Utah, are moving to being consultants versus being in a center. And I just had to do a hire in Utah, and I tell you, I was knocking every door because there's not enough bachelor's, definitely not enough masters. So I couldn't even find a master's to consult if I didn't have it in place.
So we have another student in our program, in the online master's program. She's in her first year, and she lives in Utah, and she always talks about Utah is weird with their licensure. But because I lived in Utah for 10 years, I know about it, and I'm pretty familiar with it. And I learned about rec therapy in Utah, so I feel like it's kind of like my home. That's where I got educated about it. But yeah, they have a whole different, but they don't have enough CTRSs, which is weird because they have 2 universities there that have really strong rec therapy programs, at the University of Utah and BYU, and they both produce a ton of graduates every year. But where are they going? I don't know. I think they're all going home. Maybe they don't live in Utah. They're going back to their states where they live. And
So if I
so
wanted a master's job, I could go there. That's what you're saying.
this is why I tell people,
You should do
don't
research
stay
on where
here.
to go.
Don't stay here. Don't stay. I mean, if you're from South Carolina and you want to stay in South Carolina forever, you're probably not going to work as a rec therapist.
It seems like it around here.
But there are a lot of people who want to stay exactly where they're from and they can't find a job. Okay, well, there are jobs. You just have to go somewhere else for
Yeah,
it.
that was
I
the
gotta go to
issue.
California.
California,
So I moved to-
Utah.
I moved to Durham just because I was like, oh yeah, I live in Durham. And there were jobs to apply for, but I was also competing. I mean, I interviewed for I've actually got interviews for a couple of jobs, and both said, you were great. It's just that this other person has 20 more years of experience in this. But I think it was a huge issue that I was competing with Carolina, Duke, and NC State all in that one space. And then I moved to Asheville because, it's near Western. I like Asheville. And it's so much more holistic, too, as a place, that there were more jobs that also ended up not being rec therapy. They were basically like
Rec therapy jobs.
they were let's play games,
But this
Don't
is where
keep
living
each
in a
other.
state with licensure also tightens some of that up, right? Because you cannot go to Utah and say, oh, I'm a rec therapist, and not have CTRS behind your name and TRS. So in North Carolina, your licensure is LRT, but in Utah, it's TRS. And so when they sign their name, it's TRS, CTRS, TRS/CTRS. Yeah. So you can't, just like in North Carolina, you shouldn't be able to call yourself a rec therapist without having those letters behind your name, because there's licensure. There is legislation in that state that protects that LRT.
Yeah.
It doesn't protect the CTRS, it protects the LRT.
What does FDRT stand for?
Fellow with Distinction in Recreational Therapy.
What does that mean?
And Marika, so a bunch of people have it behind, and I couldn't find out what it is, and I just looked it up, and I still couldn't find
It's like an award status.
Oh.
So she's a fellow of NART, the National Academy of Recreational Therapy. NART. That's what I call it.
it.
NART.
It's not having to put your award behind
No, but only with things like that you can.
it.
It's not
Like,
free.
you're not
It's
gonna
not
say, like, I got
public.
the Dave Austin Award.
No.
Chris says,
Can't brag about that.
But like
Chris
Brian
says
McCormick,
PhD, CTRS, FDRT.
Yeah, Brian McCormick has FDRT. I'm pretty sure
I
Dave
think
Austin
Jim
has
does
it.
too.
I've seen it pop up here and there.
I thought it was like his
No,
I thought
it's
it was
like
just another-
a fellow distinguished recreational therapy or something like that. She's a fellow, basically. It's a fellowship, and I think it's like a permanent thing too. Once you get it, you have it for life. Anyways, this has been a totally random tangent-filled conversation today. I hope that this was a good conversation as like a wrap up to the semester, right? That we didn't just bash our profession, but we had a good, healthy, robust, lively discussion about the work that needs to still happen in our field and one way that we can contribute in terms of our newfound research skills, or that we will have at the end of your degrees. Any remaining last thoughts or questions about anything? Ooh, okay.
Sorry, I knew I was going to forget. I'm so glad I didn't forget. What is the name of the website that has all the assessments?
Rehabmeasures.org. Actually, somebody commented about that on their question saying, how can we find assessments? And I'm like, guys, we talked about this in class.
I know, and I could not think of it.
But I will say this, since, rehabmeasures.org, since.
It's only for rehabilitation stuff though, right?
No,
Like not all assessments?
it applies.
Okay, I can't remember.
I mean, it was created by an interdisciplinary team of PTs, OTs, RTs, and speech peeps. But since we looked at it in class, because we did an activity in class with this, it has been updated and it looks a lot nicer.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't recommend the website.
No, it looks way nicer. It's so much more user-friendly. It looks more professional too.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can scroll on down.
I wonder if they saw the YouTube of our class. Always wonder if like weirdos watch.
Browse our database of instruments to find the right treatment for your patients or research projects. Cool, huh? So here's how they break it down. I mean, those are pretty broad, kind of specific, but broad categories. Okay, my computer is, since I've been recording class on Zoom this semester, has slowed down my computer considerably. I need an update. So if you don't know anything, I want to do something with spinal cord injuries, I need something to measure something that has to do with spinal cord injuries, you can just type something in here, like, I don't know, what outcome would I potentially want to measure? Let's just say depression. Come on, got the pinwheel of death. Ready, go. Oh, it's still thinking. Ready, go. Pinwheel of death. I hate you. It's like the blue screen of death on PCs. So it brought up a bunch of depression scales. It's so much easier to use now that they've reformatted their website. Another thing that you can do that is new is you have filters. So I can come up here and let's say I want to be more specific about their body part, about something. Spinal cord injuries. Okay, I'm really only interested in lower extremity. And maybe, oh my gosh, I can't handle the pinwheel. Ooh, lots, okay, population. So this one is really specific because I chose spinal injuries, but you can filter even more. How about, something that's useful for allied healthcare professions, working with people with spinal injuries. I don't know, let's see if I end up selecting too many things, it might filter everything out, and so you have to go backwards and put things back in. Yeah, I think I filtered too much. But you guys get it. I'm not going to pinwheel of death us too many more times here. But yeah, they've updated that website. It's fantastic. And I think if you guys walk out of this class with one tool in your toolbox, Rehab Measures Database should be it from now on, forever and ever, in research and practice. If you need to measure something, if you want to measure an outcome, this should be a place where you go. First stop, it's free. It's not like the big red book where some things you can't get out of there because you have to buy it. Well, let me rephrase. You can search for free, but there might be some things on Rehab Measures that you have to pay for. But yeah. All right, any other last questions about anything? You guys have been a great class.
How do you get to listserv on Astra or Clemson's?
Oh, that thing, that rectherapy.net.
Yeah.
It was under Astra's resources. And you click rectherapy.net. Or you just type in rectherapy.net.
Oh, it's a website? It's not like a.
It's not a
There's
website.
recreation therapy website.
Well,
That one
I
know.
typed in rectherapy.net and it
Yeah,
came
there's a
up.
website.
Well, also it came up under Astra's resources.
Yeah. I just could never.
If
figure out
that's
how to
the
get
thing
to a
y'all are
listserv.
talking about.
Recreational Therapy Net right here. It's on, go to the ATRA website. Rectherapy.net is a website, but it's not the listserv.
Yeah, it doesn't come up like when you click when you type in rectherapy.net, it like doesn't come up with the website. It comes up with something else. It
Yes,
just
it should give you directions of how to, it doesn't?
No, that's it.
it
That's
came
what
up
I
with
got
like
earlier.
smart hubs or something.
Huh, Smart Hubs, Smart CEU Hub.
Yeah, it came up with that.
Yeah, that's where you can get CEUs.
That's what it comes up with when you do it. Under resources is right here.
So I just typed in ATRA and the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association came up for our association.
Wait, say that again, what?
So I typed in ATRA, and even with Google being as smart as it is and knows everything that I research, the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association is the one that came up before.
Yeah, one time I searched ATRA way back a long time ago, and it came up with the American Tort Reform Association, which is like
That's what I'm looking for.
a legal thing, torts. Yeah,
The
anyways.
car one, if you email the car, like it's literally like one letter off from the ATRA email too.
Uh-huh.
So they're really great and they respond back very nicely. And so we get this all the time, but that's not where you need to send this.
That's
So
funny.
please resend it,
All right, guys, have a good night. Oh, by the way, course evaluations are up and open on Canvas, and I will be sending a separate course evaluation through Qualtrics that I send out personally that takes way less time to do. It's like 1 minute as opposed to 5 minutes for the university one. But Canvas, check your emails. Okay, good night, everybody. Bye. See you next week.
Thank you.
Same type of school that like you don't get your